Hello and welcome to another video. So I'll be playing Rapid today, and like I said before, I'll be taking the center to aim to try to start the game off good. And obviously I took the 2 pawns in the center approach, so I'll develop this knight first and attempt to try to stop that bishop from being able to take my pawn. And so I'm roughly about 1700 on Rapid, just so you're aware of my level. And so I'm not a grandmaster or anything, right? So I may make mistakes in these videos, but I hope to try to provide some good education. So like I said, the knights are a good developing piece, and then we can develop the bishops. Obviously they've chosen to fianchetto their bishops, which means they've moved up the G6 and the B6 pawns and moved their bishop to the squares that they're on now. And that's some good bishop development. In some people's, well, it's good, but in my opinion, it's just not what I want to play. So I'm going to passively develop my bishop here. This is a pretty passive square to go to, but I think it's good enough for right now, just to help anchor the pawn in the center. And they may push for the center in just a second, but this bishop may help us be able to defend against their attempts to maybe push in the center. And they're going to go for the fianchettoed castling, maybe, which is called the Queen's Indian if they hadn't played all these other moves in between. And so they didn't play that exact opening, but that's the opening line, in case you were wondering if they were to have played that, which some top players play that. So that's how you know it's a good opening. Like grandmasters, I don't know if you've heard of Hikaru Nakamura, but he plays that opening, and he's a pretty good grandmaster. So it's a pretty trustable opening, I'd say. And a lot has gone on. Sorry, I kind of just went on that rant about Hikaru, but there's been a lot of moves in between where we've kind of just made moves, and they've exchanged us in the center here. So honestly, we probably should have castled instead of focusing on this attack, but the attack is strong. So I always get caught up in this opening I like to play against the fianchetto, where I try to push up and force a big attack on their king. Not sure if that's going to do anything for us, though. So, why don't we go for that for right now? Just for educational purposes, to see if we can get this attack. We may not, because if this guy plays fianchetto, yeah, like I said, like I was going to say, if this guy plays the fianchetto opening a lot, he's probably seen the trick I'm trying to play against him. But so I would have wanted him to exchange or just leave that bishop there so I could exchange, and then I could open up his king in all sorts of ways at that point. But them leaving that bishop there is important, and this guy understood that. Like I said, he's probably like 1700 or more for chess.com rating, so pretty experienced level, I'd say. But if you're in, that's a good trick to remember if you're a beginner. All these tricks I'm teaching are great for beginners, because not a lot of them are going to know about stuff like this fianchetto attack that I just did. And remembering to develop your pieces before starting huge attacks is a very important thing to remember as you're beginning your chess career. Well, maybe not career, but beginning to learn how to play chess. And they finally exchanged that knight. The tension had been left there a long time, and that's another important thing to remember. Sometimes when pieces can take other pieces, it's okay not to exchange them, and it's okay to just keep the tension between them there. And they broke the tension with that capture, but sometimes it's good to keep it for a long period of time for multiple reasons. And it's good to have situational understanding, because sometimes if you take a piece like that, even though it just seems like a trade, it could be a bad thing in the long term for you. So we're I'm kind of just doing a meaningless attack lining up on their king. I'm kind of focused on the fact that this king is, my bishop's kind of slicing down this king's dark square diagonal, and obviously their dark squared bishop is doing a pretty good job of defending that right now. But if we can try to open up these light squares, like for example, if they were to just leave this, which I'm assuming they're gonna do something about it like that, it's one of the moves I was thinking of. I could have just taken it with my bishop, and then they would have been forced to take with their rook, and then I would have taken their rook with my queen, and it would have been a checkmate. But obviously they're 1700 level, like I mentioned, so they're able to see that. And I think what I want to do is try to maybe try to increase the pressure on this pawn. They may bring their king up or another move like that would defend, but we'll see what happens here. And it's good to remember stuff like this too, like even if an attack doesn't work out once, it's good to be resilient in your attack, and sometimes I'm really thinking about taking that. But yeah, and like I was saying, sometimes when you're resilient in your attack and pile on pieces, it'll work out for you. And also, sometimes attacks that don't work at the moment, if you keep them in the back of your mind, they'll work out later for you. So honestly, the move should be just to take back, but I honestly think, just for educational purposes, I'll do this, because I think that this is a good move for now. I think that that's a good check I can throw in first before capturing, because see, we're threatening their queen right now, and they can't throw in a check because of our dark squared bishop. So yeah, so this is a pretty interesting position now, and I think now is the time. Yeah, now might just about be the time to take that back, because they have stalled out our attack, and they stopped our attack from working, but we did just exchange a rook for a knight there. So, and that's a good trade in case you don't know a lot about chess. A rook is better. It's generally better than a knight, so that's why that would be good for me. And so it looks like they're aiming to try to take my pawn here, but I really don't know if that's a good move for them. I'm gonna double up because I'm not too seriously worried about them taking that pawn there because of the attacks I might have planned with these rooks dangerously being doubled up. This should be dangerous for them, and we could be able to take advantage of that. If not now, maybe later on in the game as the game goes on. It doesn't look like they have a lot of threats with the bishop just yet, because of my dark squared bishop, which is here, and could be involved in a potential attack on the king. So, obviously we don't want to lose our queen here. Okay, so they forked us, but although I do have a move where I can save it by going here, I'm counterattacking their rook over here on a8. So if they take our rook with their knight, we can take their rook with a check that they have on a8. So not quite as good as they probably hoped that fork ended up being. Even though I honestly kind of didn't really see that move, I was able to pivot my plan of just going for an attack, and responding to their threat is important sometimes. But luckily we were able to find a move here. They do end up, I wonder, because we can take their light square bishop. We can take their dark square bishop. Excuse me. Yeah, I think we ought to take their dark square bishop. And if they take that with their knight, we can take that with our rook. Because if they take the rook with their queen, we can checkmate them with the queen. So they're not able to actually take my rook back. So we basically just in case you don't know a lot about chess, a rook or a bishop and a knight that I got is better than the rook they got. So I technically won that exchange too, because of them tactically not being able to take my rook because of the checkmate here on g7 that would happen if they were to take that with their queen. They're gonna attack us and try to be able to take our rook. Yeah, if we were just to make some random move with our queen, they could take our rook for free there, so we wouldn't want to do that. So I'm going to go here, because trading queens in this position would be considered pretty favorable for me, I think, because we are up the bishop for nothing. Although these doubled pawns are not going to do us any favors if they can start getting these pawns going over here on the H and G file. But hopefully we're able to prevent that from happening. They push their pawn there. I really think that going for... Yeah, I'm going to move my rook here to try to invade on the 7th rank here and try to go for these pawns here and go for an attack on the king, maybe with the rook and bishop lined up here on the g7 square. And obviously I'm not worried about these pawns these 3 pawns that you can see over here. I wasn't terribly worried about that move either, because their rook is kind of just stuck defending this 7th rank now. And we can even check them, but I honestly don't really want to even play that right now. So let's look for moves that we can do right now. In an endgame, an active king is pretty good, so I'm going to start getting my king into the game. Obviously, you don't want to be moving your king up to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th rank in the middle of the game, but towards the end of the game, when there's only a few pieces left on the board, it's completely fine and in fact favorable if you start moving your king up. And honestly, I can start trying to maybe harass these pawns over here with my king. And obviously they're going to defend there. And if I move I'm going to change the positioning of my dark square bishop to try to attack that pawn on a7 and try to loosen up these pawns here so they're not able to defend each other as well anymore. And we'll go here and try to, since they only can defend that pawn with the rook, now we're able to most likely take that on the next move, unless I see a better move to do on that next move. And obviously they're trying to get their king active too, so they might be moving their king up later on. And let's do this. So they're forced now to trade rooks because the rook is pinned to the king, so if they were to move their rook away somewhere, I would be able to take their king, which they aren't allowed to leave their king in check. So they're going to go here. And so I have a pawn majority on this side, 3-2. So maybe if I try to get some exchanges going here, then I'll have a passed pawn over here, which means there's no other pawn that can take your pawn, and your pawn's pretty much gone for the races. And these pawns might become dangerous for me, but I think I can stop them with my light squared bishop, and eventually the pawn on the G file will be stopped by these pawns, my pawn on F2 anyway. So I'm not terribly worried about that just yet. And see here. Endgames are hard though, like, I might lose this game still, so I'm going to move this pawn up, try to exchange, and then we have a pass pawn here, so their king really isn't able to leave this side of the board right now, because of our pawn over here that they have to worry about. So if their king were to leave to try to defend these two pawns on the G and H file, then my pawn could just go and promote, and there's nothing they can do about it, since they don't have a bishop on the board like me. So I'm going to start pushing this pawn and allude to the fact that I'm going to try to be pushing this pawn forward, and we'll see what I want to do with this, because I might just end up abandoning this to go chase their pawns over here, which might not be good, because they might, yeah, I think this should be good for me, because I'm probably going to be able to take these pawns from them and then maybe win with the doubled pawns, but it might end up being a draw, honestly, I'll admit. Let's take that. Wow, this might be a draw. Dang it, I drew the game because I think I drew this game, but it's fine. I think I maybe thought of something. So they're going to take either one of those pawns, and yeah, they're going to take my other pawn. So this is going to be a draw, but honestly, a great job to my opponent for doing this well and being able to. Honestly, it was probably a draw from the beginning, but I had that pawn majority, but I did make the mistake of. So my big mistake here, and why I didn't win the game, was I ended up going for these pawns over here, and I forgot that their king would have time to come back and take my pawns, because I forgot that I kind of forgot that my bishop was going to be forced to defend that pawn from promoting, but it's it was pretty much a draw anyway, but I did win that pawn at one point, so yeah, so good game to my opponents. It's a draw today. And obviously, as you can see, in case you didn't know, it's just a